Welcome to the Tech for Good with Beth Green Ventures podcast. My name is Dama Sathianathan, partner at B2B, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Patrick Sheehan, founder and managing partner of ETF Partners. Hello, Patrick, and thank you for joining us today.
Oh, great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll just start off very slow. Let's start off, actually, I say slow, but ETF Partners has been around the block for many, many decades now. But tell us a bit more in how you got started with ETF Partners. What do you do at the fund, at the firm, and what kind of companies do you typically back?
Well, we started 20 years ago now, and we started because it just felt like the right thing to do. I'd been in venture capital a long time and had come back from California, from Silicon Valley, and wanted to do my own thing. But part of the reason we came back as a family was because we were thinking where it would be good for us to bring up our children who were just hitting sort of senior school age. And my wife and I both believed in that climate change was a real thing back then. And so I ended up thinking it would be really embarrassing to believe in climate change and to be moving for the sake of the kids and to do nothing about it. Wouldn't that be terrible? So it then dawned on me that we should be able to use venture capital to help address the problems of climate change through innovation. And we gradually called that, when we started a firm to do it, we called that sustainability through innovation. And that's kind of what we've been doing for 20 years. In fact, that phrase has been around many, many years for us now. So we find technology-rich, innovative companies that are up and running. These days, we're looking for companies with revenue and growth, and we help really propel their growth. We invest in European companies, typically £5-10 million at a time, to help them achieve great things.
Yeah. And that was back in 2005, right?
That's when we started, yeah. I had been in venture capital a long time before that, in fact, but which has made it a bit easier to start. We started at a time when the idea of talking about climate and venture capital was frankly a bit odd.
Yeah. That's definitely seen a bit of a reversal now, don't you?
Well, I think it's great, actually. It doesn't surprise me that there's more and more emphasis on it because the need is even more obvious. But honestly, it was probably pretty obvious 20 years ago. Otherwise, we couldn't have got going. We just had to point out the obvious to people in a clear way to be able to start a fund.
Yeah. I remember back in, oh gosh, yeah, the early 2000s, around sort of having a lot of explorations, and the Brundtland report that I came out, was it 1985? On sort of sustainable development in particular had such a huge impact on people and planet and society at that age. But I guess just sort of digging a bit deeper into this, what did first get you interested in sustainability and impact and the sort of pairing up of those themes into venture capital? What have you seen that didn't work in VC, but where you could see the sort of potential for sustainability in VC?
I think it was a gradual realization that climate change was a real thing. And if you accept that it's a real phenomena, then it will only get worse if we don't address it. So the logic just seemed inescapable, and that's what drew me to think about it. Because having accepted that, then it felt like the society would need to change. Clearly, no one's going to vote for a reduced standard of living, and so the only solution is really around innovation. I thought that 20 years ago. I still think that today. I think it's even more obvious today. But when we started 20 years ago, we had to sell the concept that you could use venture capital for a purposeful investing. Actually, when we started, we didn't use the word impact. We didn't use the word sustainability because we probably couldn't have raised any money if we did. So we just talked about the opportunity afforded by climate change, that it would lead to restructuring of whole industries, and those in the vanguard of change should reap disproportionate rewards. So we framed it as a business opportunity. And to some, that perhaps felt distasteful, actually, that this problem was framed as an opportunity. That's kind of the way capitalism works, right? Or should work. The need should be the opportunity. And so that's what we explained.
Yeah. We see sort of many parallels with how we talk about tech for good and the sort of urgency of actually calling for better solutions and serving for needs, not just wants, which resonates quite strongly with what you're building and have built over the decades. I guess that sort of brings us to next question around sort of if you could maybe give us a bit of an example of a company you've backed that really shows what ETF is all about.
Oh gosh, there could be many. I'll pick one because I think it's a nice story, and so I'll tell you the story of our investment in a company called DeepSea. And this came about because we've moved over the years from investing in all sorts of companies, because 20 years ago we had to, as an emerging field, and we focus more and more on what these days I'd call the intelligence layer that enables modern infrastructure. And that's a phrase that we use to encapsulate this idea that digital companies can have disproportionate impact and very rapid impact. So we get the biggest, fastest bang for the buck in them. And so that's where we focus today. And I'll give you one great illustration of that. Because lots of people criticized us for that, by the way. They said, oh, you should be doing the hard stuff. Things like shipping. Shipping's really terrible. It's going to take, 90 billion just to change the ports to allow for the new fuel. It's going to take billions a year. So that's really hard. You should do hard stuff. So what we did with DeepSea was we found a couple of young Greek PhD guys, very smart, lovely people, by the way, who wanted to use AI to help people pilot ships more effectively. And it turns out that you can save 10 to 15% of fuel if you do that. Nearly all of the 3 or 4% of global warming that shipping accounts for is caused by fuel. It turns out with software, smart AI software, you can save 10 or 15% of that immediately, right? So we invested 5 million in this company. It raised about the same elsewhere. It grew quite fast and sold to a giant Japanese shipping technology company quite rapidly. So it's a nice story as an investment, but actually it's a lovely story because the impact of that software is maybe 0.5% of global warming, and it in global terms nothing, right?
Yeah.
So instant impact, and it doesn't entirely solve the problem, but it's got to be common sense to do cost-effective, fast things as an active priority, right? So that's a lovely illustration, I think.
Yeah. That is also very, as you say, very tangible impact on an industry that is also very slow to sort of transition into.
Exactly, and that's where at the time we didn't talk about the intelligence layer, but as we thought about it, we thought more and more there is this layering of intelligence over all sorts of infrastructure. Think of shipping as infrastructure that can produce typically at least 10% improvement really, really fast. So actually there's a massive gains to be had there.
Yeah.
I mean, gains in terms of impact, but they drive great investment returns as well because they happen very quickly.
Yeah. The unit economics work for this one. It was grand to see. I mean, ETF Partners has recently raised a bigger fund to make bold investments, right? So what kind of founders are you, and what kind of ideas with sort of the notion that you mentioned around the intelligence layer are you most excited about right now?
Well, we are focusing very much on Europe, in part because I think our brand can work across Europe more easily, and we can get there and back in a day, so we can talk to people enough. So Europe is our footprint, and we're trying to help very ambitious founders who are working in digital companies, hardware and software, fit into this theme of the intelligence layer very broadly. And that's typically people who are beginning to do pretty well already. Probably their ambition levels, if anything, are rising, and they want to raise money to really make a leap forwards. And it's those people. We like to work with people we get on with, who share common values with us. And actually, today, people often want to work with us because of shared values, which is a lovely development, which 10 years ago, that never happened, right? But I think with more purpose-driven founders, that alignment of interest is better. And one of the real secrets of venture capital is alignment of interest, as you know.
Yeah. We have that often now that founders are also asking us in terms of where our investment and where who our LPs are, where our money is coming from to actually invest into the companies as well. The value alignment sort of trickles upwards, it seems, which is, very fascinating to sort of see that people want to also just be morally sound in where they're taking money from, which is quite exciting.
I think it's just better business. And we operate in a high trust environment. And so alignment of values is really helpful in terms of building trust rapidly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess maybe as a notion for the listeners, particularly the founders amongst the audiences, what sort of stage does ETF Partners usually come in, and to what sort of stage do you usually take your companies forward?
Well, we'll typically invest when there's working product, there's revenue, there's some repeat customers, and that we can see growth happening, and so we can We can talk to customers, which makes things easier for us, and we can also get a sense of the scale of opportunity more easily. And after that, I think every company is quite unique, really. We don't. It's hard to operate to too many set rules. People sometimes say, "Well, what's your minimum revenue?" To which I say, "I don't know really. I want to be able to talk to some customers. I want to understand why they really want the product." So it's more judgmental then.
Yeah.
And then in terms of the outcomes, I think we're trying to take companies to a point where the founders feel successful and the companies feel they've made a big difference. Again, but I wouldn't easily put any numbers to that.
Yeah, yeah. I guess given the sort of scope of different verticals that you invest across in, it's quite hard to sort of get like a general consensus on like, oh yeah, it has to hit the revenue.
Yeah, and they're not our companies, right?
Mm,
We own through our funds a small proportion of the equity
mm,
backing the founders, and so I
mm.
think it's wise for us to listen to them
Yeah.
and understand and try and support them in their adventure, right? It's not ours, it's theirs.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, I love investors who take this approach to the founder journey. It just also ultimately means that a lot more VCs can work in a very founder friendly way, which is grand. I guess I had the pleasure of actually digging a bit deeper into one of the white papers ETF Partners
Okay,
fairly recently, and also congrats on 20 years,
thank you.
which is a very exciting milestone. Can you tell us a bit more about what you've sort of uncovered in backing founders in the space for 20 years and what sort of, I will also say, I love the sort of practical optimism that really shone through in
Mm.
the white paper. So what are some of the things that make you feel hopeful about the sort of investment landscape in sustainability and impact?
Well, first, that's very kind. Thank you. And I think I do feel hopeful.
Mm,
I think, frankly, to be an investor, you have to be an optimist. To be a founder, you have to be an optimist. And it's optimists who make things happen, right? So, but there's a fine line between optimism and delusion, of course, and we need to stay the right side of it.
mm,
But I think my entire team are profoundly optimistic about the power of technology
mm,
to be used for good. It doesn't have to be, but it can be, right? And it offers us promise that we really should try and access. And so we've seen over the years the rate of technological change accelerating, and therefore we've become more optimistic. But it's up to us to kind of then get stuck in and make a difference. And we do that listening carefully to the entrepreneurs who own the journey and the excitement. And we can hope, as you say, to offer experience because
mm.
everyone's journey is unique, but the themes tend to be the same. So we've kind of seen the movies before,
Yeah.
and that can be very helpful. And so we did put some of those learnings into the paper you might be referring to called the intelligence layer, but actually a lot of them are even simpler. It's a uh, I think our secret, if anything, is about alignment of interest. It's
Mm,
about temperament, not getting too excited when things go well, actually, but certainly not getting too depressed when things go badly, because things will just never
mm,
entirely go to plan. And so I think it's important to be consistently, patiently helpful. People can be helped in different ways. People's desire for help varies as well, of course, right? So we
mm,
can't force help on people, but we can, through experience, suggest what might happen next, what people could be thinking about. We can offer all sorts of contacts. Uh, we can help give the perspective of some slight distance from the challenges, which is probably the most valuable of all.
mm. Yeah, yeah. The slight distance from the challenges is not always so distant, is it?
Well, no, it varies.
Yeah, yeah. Which is always quite fun when you get to work with founders, but and also very humbling. I guess to our last question, and we ask most of our investors coming onto the podcast the same question. But if someone listening wants to build something with real impact, what's your advice to them?
I've got so much advice. I'm pausing to know where to start. I guess I'd say that if you really want to do it, you should do it because you'll probably regret it otherwise. But then I think it's worth stepping back a bit. I think it's worth planning, preparing, and thinking, why do people succeed? And
Mm,
there's an element of luck, of course, but often there's those who succeed have real motivation, have real resilience, and actually prepare quite a lot.
mm,
So I'd suggest one good way of doing that is to think about the future you're trying to create and visualize it and emotionally live in it for a while, both for the motivation and resilience it will bring, but also because it's easier almost to imagine being there and look back and then figure out from that strange perspective, what are the hard decisions you had to make to get there, right?
mm.
Um, And I think sometimes changing perspective like that can be incredibly useful.
Yeah.
But it's very easy just to decide to be optimistic, right? I don't think that's a good idea. Optimism is useful. I think it's incredibly useful to figure out what's required for real success. So if you were going to climb Mount Everest, if that was your ambition, great, you should do it, but you shouldn't just set off on the instant in your flip-flops, right? You would actually plan, you'd make sure you have a support team, you would figure out all the resources you need. So
Mm,
so the same thing, if you're trying to build a towering business, you should
mm.
do the same.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Ask yourself the hard questions, as you say, which is, yeah, very important. Thank you so much, Patrick, and thank you so much for joining us today on Tech for Good. For all the listeners out there, if you have any suggestions for guests or topics we should be covering on Tech for Good, do get in touch. And if you're thinking of starting a Tech for Good venture and are looking for investment, don't forget to check out bethnalgreenventures.com to see whether we might be able to help. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening and goodbye.